Good evening. Is volume good? Okay. So Adam and family are in Tampa, I think. Florida College, summer camp, something leadership. I think all the directors of Florida College camps are on some group or committee, and they go down once a year and powwow. So he asked me to lead the discussion tonight and Sunday. So according to the schedule, we are Leviticus 1 through 7 tonight. That's 7 full chapters. Next class period, Sunday, is 8 through 10. By my math, that's like less than half the chapters of tonight. So this is not going to be detailed, nitty-gritty, every verse, every detail kind of coverage. I'm not prepared for that, number one, and there ain't time for that, number two. I hope you're good with that approach. So, Leviticus, what do you make of it? Say? Explain, very detailed.
Very detailed in their service to God.
Okay.
It had to be done a special way. It's something that I notice. You can't do things the whole way to serve God. No matter what. It has to be done God's way. If God doesn't say it, it's not holy. It's not what we can't perform anything God we please. It's has to be God and us.
Okay. So one observation is lots of details, lots of specific instructions. Have to do things in a particular way to be pleasing to God. Other thoughts? Yes, sir. The sir on the left. My left. My left. He raised his hand first. Go ahead.
Several of these offerings are naturally in relationship to the covenant with God. So it's offerings for sin, guilt, or burnt offering, etc. But in several of the offerings, you see the priests also taking portions of them. So there's this kind of there's this dual purpose where you are, making it to the God for whatever that purpose, whatever the offering is for purpose.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The other left. So I'm not sure what in the world you mean by these uncomfortable topics, especially if you talk about them in public places. Can you give me like an idea of what you mean? Okay. No? All right. Well, you're leaving us to all imagine. Each of us has to imagine what in the world you're talking about. Very good. Very good. All right. Well, a few high-level kind of summary at the outset of a study of a book observations. So this is the third book in the Bible. There's 5 books, the first 5 books that are referred to as the Pentateuch. Penta 5, right? And the Jews call it the Torah. So really important books in Israelite history and Scripture. Not that there's any book that's not important. These books are the first books. They are the formative books of the nation. The setting where the events take place are near Mount Sinai, about 13 months out of Egypt. There are three main characters in this book. You've got God, Yahweh, Moses, the clear, undisputed, by almost everybody, undisputed representative for God, spokesman to the people. He's the lawgiver. He's the one that went up and got the mountain, onto the mountain, got the law and came back. And then you've got the first high priest, Aaron. Here is a simple outline of the book. The people, as a nation, were to be holy priests of God to the world. Now you may be thinking, like I have thought on occasion, wait, how are they priests to the world? They're in many ways, they're killing people, getting rid of them, so they can come into the land that they've been promised. They're to the people, not intermingle with them, right? So in what way are they priests to the world? No, I'm talking about the Israelites as a whole are priests to the world, to the nations, to all the peoples all over the earth. The nation of Israel went in and exterminated. They were commanded to exterminate. The extent to which they didn't follow God's instructions is the extent to which they left people alive. Right? Is that an upside down way of viewing a priest's duty? I dare say it is. I dare say it is, that most of us don't think about priests as, killing people. And then there's also the general teaching that you're to stay away from the people. You're not to intermingle with them. They're bad. They're pagan. They're idolatrous. They're immoral. And you're to not be tainted by them. So again, my question is, how is it that the nation of Israel, the people, the nation as a whole, were serving as priests of God to the world? Okay? Within the nation. Yes. Okay. I'll try it one more time. The whole nation, there's how many tribes? 12 tribes. Maybe 13 if you count Joseph's two sons. They get counted as two tribes, right? They get land. You got Levi not getting land, but it's still a tribe. The whole nation is described as priests of God. Let's stop there. Do you agree with that? Okay. I mean, it's a concept in the Old Testament that not only are the Levites priests, intermediaries between God and the whole people, the nation generally, but Israel is a nation of priests. The passage in 1 Peter that quotes, "You are to be a nation of priests, a holy people," where's that from? Are those original words to Peter? Let's go back and look at it. Right? It's Old Testament. I guarantee you that. We'll go to 1 Peter. Say it out loud loud enough where I can hear it. 1 Peter 2 verse 9. You want to read that?
So you are a chosen
Thank you. So in my print, my Bible, a lot of those words are all caps, which is the way that this version of the Bible signifies an Old Testament quotation. So we've got in chapter 9, a chosen race is from glasses. Where did I do with my glasses? So we got Isaiah 43:20, we got Deuteronomy 10:15. Next is a royal priesthood, letter B, that's Isaiah 61:6, Isaiah 66:21. Alan, you have some other verses? 19:6, that is the holy nation, I think specifically. Deuteronomy 7:6, holy nation. Yeah. Okay, so in the Old Testament, God describes the nation as a whole, the people generally, as priests. This is really not the main point, right? I don't want to get hung up any longer on this observation. It is simply that in some of their activities, in some of the behaviors, in some of the things God told them to do, it is, to me at least, a surprising thing that priests would do these things, right? Like priests are to stay away and not mingle with the nations because they're unholy, they're immoral, they're pagan. They are, as they come into the land, they are specifically, expressly told, I want you to wipe the people out. Don't leave any of them alive. Burn their temples. Don't covet their stuff. Don't say the names of their gods out loud. Don't take oaths by the names of their gods. This is a very strong, clear teaching in the Old Testament. And yet they are described as a nation, a people of priests to the world. So I'm just asking, back up. What is the sense in which they are priests? Yes, sir. Okay. The primary role of the priest is twofold. It is bilateral. Okay? So the priest has a role on behalf of God to the people, which is to deliver the words of God, to represent God to the people, right? To defend and maintain and the honor of God, right? And teach the people. That's why the priests were not holed up in one land area. They were in, I think, 48 cities spread out throughout the nation. The priests need to be out among the people, teaching the people. The other thing the priests did, the other direction, is the priests went to God on behalf of the people. They interceded to God on the people. They offered sacrifices, right? So that's the generic role of a priest. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Jehovah God is a multifaceted God. Yes, he is loving and kind, which is one of the aspects of the New Testament, but priests are killing people. Why? You take the Canaanites, for example, worshiping pagan gods and committing atrocities such as child sacrifice. By killing those people, the priests, the nation of Israel, are teaching the world that is not okay by God.
Mm-hmm.
You have similar statements earlier in the book of Exodus, where God, I think it's Exodus 12, where God said they will declare judgment against the gods of Egypt.
Right.
And so the priests are part of their role is after that Exodus period, declare the judgment, part of those declare judgment, to teach the world about God's nature. That's one of them. The second goal of why they do the particular things, specifically why they don't mix people, is the second word of one of them. They're holy.
Yes.
They are set apart. They don't have to be tainted, so that they can best represent the purity and holiness that is God. You cannot represent a holy being by defiling yourself, and that's why the priests are kept separate and not to mix with the neighboring country, not to commit any oaths with any land agreements, things like that, so they can be holy representations of God.
Okay. Agree with all that. So the nation of Israel was God's special people. Of course, there's an important role where he, through this incubator of a nation, is bringing his son into the world, the Messiah into the world. But while these hundreds, even thousands of years are passing, the nation of Israel was intended to be a glorious representation of a people influenced by God, set apart for God. They are to be morally holy. They don't behave like the other nations, right? God is going to pour and just shower blessings on them. Again, it's a beacon. You're like, wow, look at them. They are the people of Yahweh. Look how he takes care of them. And in that way, to draw people to God in a positive way, in a favorable way. There is going to be some interaction between the nation of Israel and other nations. That's unavoidable, right? They have boundary nations. There's wars periodically. What did the prostitute in Jericho, her name escapes me? Rahab, yes. What did Rahab tell the spies? We've heard about you, okay? That is happening in every generation. We've heard about you. And the plan was, for when they hear about you, they hear about a holy people serving the Lord faithfully according to his high moral, high righteous standard, and he blesses them, and in that way draws people to Yahweh. So the whole nation is priests. The first few chapters that we'll talk about tonight are about how to give offerings. Chapters 8 through 10 on Sunday. Aaron and the sons are ordained. There's also a big problem, an episode, an event that is a gross violation of holiness. Cleanliness laws, 11 through 15. The holy place is described in chapter 16, and the holy people are elaborated upon in 17 through 27. I like this outline better, this one, which is a symmetry in the book, a chiasm. We've seen this before in Scripture, where there is a kind of a poetry or a symmetry in the way the concepts are laid out. You can see that the central topic is the Day of Atonement. It is the topic that kind of pulls all the other topics related. And then if you go out from there, you see purity themes. There is one section that's on ceremonial purity, one that's on moral purity. What's quick for anybody who might be unsure about that? Ceremonial purity versus moral purity. Internal, external. Okay. Anybody else? Ceremonial purity, moral purity. If you do something external by beating your brother over the head with a rock, is that ceremonial or is that moral? That's moral. So I don't know if internal, external captures all of it, but moral purity would be real morality, fundamental morality that would transcend time periods and what law you're under, things like lying and stealing and adultery and murder, right? And then there'd be ceremonially unpure things. How many of you had fat in the last 2 weeks? Eaten fat, okay? Over in Georgia, spent Labor Day weekend with my Megan and Rusty, and he made steaks, and they were so good. And the best part was the fat. And we're like all celebrating the fat. And then I read Leviticus. I'm studying, I'm preparing. I'm like, oh, man, all that fat. Okay? Ceremonially, right? Does any of us think that that's moral purity? Essential, underlying, fundamental morality? A lot of us raised our hands that we've eaten fat. So, that's the basic difference between moral and ceremonial purity. There's the priests that are talked about 2 different times, and then there are the rituals. A big part of Leviticus is about the rituals that the people were to follow. So the first 7 chapters are about sacrifices or offerings, different types and how to do them. And then the last 3 chapters are about the feasts, the different festivals on their calendar that they were to follow. I heartily recommend the Bible Project on the book of Leviticus. There have been one or two, one of the Old Testament books that was about, was it Ezra, Nehemiah, somewhere in there, where I think they went totally off the rails about marriage and divorce and that. But most of the times when I go to the Bible Project and listen to their overall summary of the book, it's usually 8, 10, 12 minutes. Really good. Really simplifies and gets to the essence of the main points. Artwork's not bad. It just really helps clarify for me some things. You know, I sit and listen to over and over again Leviticus 1 through 7, and my head is just like spinning, like, wow, man, that's a lot of details to keep up with. This 8, 10, 12-minute video will kind of just simplify and boil it down to its big picture themes. I think there's supposed to be print there. Boy, that does not. Oh, okay. If you were picking a theme of Leviticus, might it be holiness? Yeah, and this wouldn't be a bad, key verse or theme verse. Thus you are to be holy to me, for I, the Lord, am holy. I have set you apart from the peoples to be mine. So let's talk a little bit about some of the key concepts that we're going to find in Leviticus, one of them being holy. What does holy mean? Set apart. It's a simple concept with a lot of nuance and a lot of depth to it, right? So I would organize the concept of holy primarily around 2 levels. Kind of like there's moral purity and ceremonial purity, there are a couple dimensions of holiness. One of them I would call qualitative holiness. God is qualitatively holy. He is unlike anything, anyone else. He is so far above and different from, other than people, animals, anything else you can name, right? Qualitatively different. And then there are things that are holy because they are arbitrarily decided to be holy. Right? And you see examples of that throughout the law, throughout the practice of the Israelites. We see that examples of that in our own lives. Where let's take a ceramic pot, a clay pot. It's just like any other clay pot. But if we decide to say, hey, this is the special clay pot, then it becomes holy. It becomes set apart either for the purpose that it's going to be used, or maybe it's used in a ceremony, or it gets used in a certain place. Really, you know that clay pot, there's nothing distinctive about it. There's nothing unique or unusual about it. It's not made of a more precious material, but we've agreed this is going to be special. It's set apart for a purpose. Right? So those are 2 basic concepts of holiness throughout the book. Any comments, questions on that? Observations? Here's an example in chapter 6, verse 24 through 27. Look how many times the word holy is used there. You can take an example about an animal. It's a lot like any other animal. It's a sheep, it's a goat, it's a bull. It's a lot like any other one. But if you pick it out, if it qualifies, and you pick it out to be the animal that you're going to sacrifice, now it's holy, it's been made special. If it goes through this special ceremony at the altar, now it's holy, it's set apart. The blood that from this animal is different from the blood of all the animals in the herd that are still eating and grazing and doing their thing, right? Here would be an example of qualitative holiness. Qualitative holiness. If you're going to bring a sacrifice to the altar, to the tabernacle to offer to God, can you just pick out randomly a sheep out of the flock? No? What details could matter? Without blemish. Now, would that require any effort? Would you just quickly run through the herd and say, oh yeah, I don't see it. That was good. Let me grab that one up and run to the tabernacle? Or would you be inspecting it, turning it over, laying it down, feeling its bones, making sure there's nothing wrong with it? You can't find a defect. Yeah? Anything else that's specified about the animal? Sometimes it has to be male. Did you notice reading 1 through 7 that sometimes it can be female and sometimes it should be female? It needs to be female. So it's not universally male. It depends on the kind of sacrifice and the situation. Sometimes it has to be from the first year. Sometimes it needs to be the firstborn from its mother. So those are all qualitative differences, right? Other sheep are just sheep. You can't tell the difference between them. So being without blemish, that would be an example of qualitative holiness. Got a holy place. What kind of holiness would this represent? The Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron your brother not to come at any time into the holy place inside the veil before the mercy seat that is on the ark, so that he may not die, for I will appear in the cloud over the mercy seat." Qualitative? An easy case to be made for qualitative. Because God is holy, qualitatively holy. He is essentially, fundamentally holy, set apart. And so anything related to him, anything touching him, the space around him is also holy. On the other hand, you could say, some of the stuff, some of it's gold-plated and really ornate and special materials were used, right? But the tabernacle was a mobile tent. So the camp picks up and moves, and 5 days later, you're standing on the place where the tabernacle was. It's just another place, isn't it? So, qualitative and arbitrary. Okay, another concept that's important in Leviticus is clean versus unclean, or pure versus impure. It's important to understand that a lot of the things that made you impure were not sinful. Right? Did you get that? Do you get that from the reading? You're still impure, and if you're impure and you try to go into the presence of God, right? You try to do holy things near a holy God in the service, in the ritual of worshiping him, and you're unclean, that's a sin. But becoming unclean in and of itself is not inherently sinful. It happens a lot, okay? Anybody up on what makes someone ceremonially unclean? Okay? It's emissions, yeah? Yeah? So it's really only a handful of things. It is contact with reproductive body fluids. Of course, one of which was blood, right? Menstrual flow, but not only blood, other reproductive fluids. Mold, fungus, coming into contact with that made you unclean. Coming into contact with any kind of dead body, human, animal carcass, any kind of dead body, you are ceremonially unclean or impure. And having a skin disease, right? Different, like leprosy and different kinds of things that you had to go check with the priest and see how serious it was. Now, why are these things all in the category of making you ceremonially unclean? Why do you suppose that is? Besides the fact God said so, obviously that settles it. But can you see anything in common? Why it makes sense? Why this is a symbolic value, a symbolic meaning? Yeah.
Concerning blood, in particular, God said life is in the blood, so there's always something special about blood.
Yeah. Right. Now, life is in the blood, while my blood is in the body. But what happens when the blood is not in the body? Is blood a symbol of life? Then it's a symbol of death, right? So think about the mold and the fungus. Think about the dead carcass. Think about the reproductive fluids, the skin ailments. They're all symbolic of mortality. They conjure the idea of loss of life, of death. Shorthand, death. Okay? And what is God's essence? Life. So these things are symbolic of the opposite of God's holiness. Because what sets God apart, his essence is life. He is the source of all life, the creator of all life, the sustainer of all life. He's about life. And these things are death. They are symbolic of death and mortality and decay. And so, it's not sinful. Now, if you killed the thing, you killed the person and made them dead, now that's moral impurity. You committed murder. But if you happen upon a dead body, if you are caring for somebody and they die, these are all things that you might have been doing a really good thing, but you are now symbolically impure or unclean. Okay. Yeah, so there's 5, chapter 5, 2 through 3. Look at all those uncleans. Dizzying to think about unclean, unclean, unclean. Just bombarded with unclean. Here are the 5 types of sacrifices. Now, will anybody else admit to being a little confused on the categories of sacrifices? Okay, I look at some references, you Google it and you say, hey, what are the 5 types? What are the types of sacrifices? Oh, here are the 5 types, here are the 4 types, here are the 6 types. They can't even agree on how many types there are. Okay, but I did find several sources that said 5. They get called by different names. I listened to King James yesterday. Completely different words. They're talking about meat offerings. And they're referring to grain, right? Calling them meat offerings. Not meal, meat. So there's different words for them. But this is the outline of the different types of sacrifices, and I'm comfortable with 5 distinct types. Okay, so now we're getting into kind of the text of the details of the text that we're covering tonight. But before we do that, I want to do one thing that I think was pretty cool when I was exposed to this by the Bible Project. All right, I need 3 volunteers to read a short passage each. 3 volunteers. David, could you read Exodus when I'm ready? Exodus 40, 34 through 35. And then I need another volunteer. Leviticus 1:1. Leviticus 1:1. And then I need one more volunteer. Chris, can you read Numbers 1:1? Okay, now you got to read slow, guys. You got to read slow. And if you could do one more favor for me when you read, emphasize the words that I want you to emphasize as you read, okay? All right. Go ahead, David. This is Exodus 40, verses 34 and 35. Okay, stop right there. So, the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, it is the place where God has chosen to come dwell among his people. His visible, tangible presence dwells there. And when the Shekinah glory came and visibly came and dwelled in the temple, Moses what? Could not enter. Could not enter. Okay.
And the Lord called unto Moses and spake unto him out of the tabernacle of the congregation.
The Lord, this is the next verse. This is the next verse. The story continues. The tabernacle has been constructed. The Lord has come to dwell in his tabernacle among his people, and Moses couldn't go in. This is the same Moses who went up on the mountain multiple times and had a meal with the Lord and saw the Lord, but he couldn't go in. And now the Lord is speaking to Moses from the tent. From the tent. And now you get to Numbers 1:1.
The Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting, the first day of the second month, the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt.
I like what he did there. Do you see how he emphasized in the tent? Is that significant, or are these just prepositions? What do you think? Is there a meaningful story to be told here? Are we to get any kind of spiritual reality from the way that's described? Nobody's daring to make a run on that, right? Which you know I don't know. So you know I'm not going there. You know that's not what this is about. All right, what happened in Exodus? At the end of the Exodus, could not go into the tent of meeting. Okay? But what happened? What's the whole book of Exodus about? It's about God, after hundreds of years, finally, at last, on his time scale, he goes and gets his people out of slavery and delivers him with a mighty right arm, with a strong right hand. He takes them out. He judges the Egyptian. He judges the Pharaoh, right? He shows himself eminently more powerful and mighty than the gods of Egypt. He delivers them out. He shows them through a series of wonders, of just awesome displays of power. He delivers them out. He takes them out of slavery. He brings them to the mountain, the holy mountain, the one that is shaking. And there's smoke and fog and cloud, and there's lightning and thunder, and they are just scared to death. And he delivers the law through Moses, and the people say in response to the invitation, "Will you be my people? I will be your God." And what do they say? Yes, whatever you say, we will do. And so the blood is sprinkled on the people and different things. I don't have all that memorized, right? And I mean, is it hours? Is it days later? And what happens? They rebel. Not just a little bit. They didn't stumble across something or fall into something. I mean, they went head first into one of the 10 commandments, and multiple of the 10, right? They're rising up to play. There's sexual immorality going on, right? And most flagrantly, they have graven an image to worship. Now, is that a big thing, a little thing? That's a big thing. Now, how do we know it's a big thing? What are some measures of how big this was? Number one, the meekest man on the planet comes down. By the way, he's been told by God, hey, you need to go back down. Your people down there are just getting out of hand. And so he goes down, and as he gets closer, he hears it, he sees it. The meekest man on the planet, measured response, like, there might be a problem here. Maybe I should sort this out. Or he's so angry, he throws the sacred, precious tablets of the law. I think it's the Ten Commandments. I think it's 2 copies of the Ten Commandments. God's copy, the people's copy. Yeah? Small enough for him to carry. Hebrew, a very compact language. I don't know it, but it's a compact language. You could write easily front and back the Ten Commandments, 2 copies, like we do with contracts, right? You get a copy, I get a copy, you keep a copy in your safe, I keep a copy in my safe. Except here, where are both copies kept? In the ark. Small little box. They have to be pretty small tablets. Why are 2 copies in the ark? That's where, yes, but what's the symbolic significance? Yes, but shouldn't 1 copy be in God's pocket and 1 copy be in the people's pocket? Yeah, and that's where they are. They're in the ark together, where God dwells with his people. And that's where the people keep the sacred holy things, like the jar of manna and Aaron's rod that budded. I know, I'm on a tangent. I think it's the Ten Commandments. I think it's 2 copies of the Ten Commandments. I think there's really good circumstantial evidence to come to that conclusion. But how do we know it's a big deal? Because Aaron threw the tablets down in anger and busted them to pieces. How else do we know? We killed 1,000 people on the spot. We ran them through with spears. How else do we know? What became of this beautiful calf, this beautiful piece of artwork? It got ground into powder and put in their water, and they had to drink it. How else do we know? God said to Moses, get out of the way. Stand aside, because I am going to break out on these people. I'm going to start over with you. So there's a lot of ways that it's obvious that this was a big deal. The relationship has already been damaged. It's already been ruptured. I am a holy God, says the Lord. He proved it to them in all these ways, and yet within a few days, they are flagrantly violating it. You are an unholy people. I cannot dwell with you. And so when God comes down to the temple to engulf it and inhabit it in this amazing, marvelous way, Moses can't go in. Even Moses can't go in, because God is holy and these people are not holy. They are rebellious. Then you have Leviticus. And how does God have to talk to Moses? From out the tent. God's in the tent. Moses got to stand outside, and he speaks to him from the tent. Leviticus, in a nutshell, guys, Leviticus is God's plan for how can this woeful, sinful, weak, rebellious people become holy, become set apart, such that God can dwell with them. And then in Numbers, God is speaking to Moses in the tent. Leviticus has done its job. God's plan of having a temporary solution for sin through these rituals and the priesthood and the offerings and the feasts, ceremonially clean, morally clean, under these circumstances. I think that's it. The other possibility is that the glory of God was just so awesome and powerful and overwhelming and filled up the tent that there was no room for Moses to go in. You could say that. I like the first story better. I think it fits the spiritual theme. I think it fits the timeline. I think the prepositions matter. All right. So we got burnt offerings. First bell, right? burnt offerings. You might say that burnt offerings were one of the two categories where people could come to God and say thank you, and honor God and praise God and worship God because of his blessings and his goodness, and they say thank you. It signified dedication of oneself to the Lord. It had to be a clean animal without defect. There were different kinds of animals and just one after another. If it's this, this is how you do it. The offering, the person who brought the offering had to lay his hand on his head and kill the animal himself. Why do you think that is? Why don't we just delegate that to the priests? Okay. There is a connection. You are killing this innocent animal with your own hands. You hear it bleeding, you hear it whatever noises it's making, okay? And it's going to die instead of you. Entire animal except the sin is burned, none is eaten. It's accompanied by grain offering and drink offering. These are just short summaries. How many of you have read Leviticus recently or listened to it recently? One of the takeaways is just repetition. Another takeaway is so many details. Like, how did they keep up with this? The other answer is they didn't. They didn't keep up with it, right? Because it was hard. And do you think it was accidentally hard, or do you think it was intentionally hard? I think it was intentionally hard. Intentionally hard. All right, we got grain offerings, a voluntary expression of devotion to God if offered by itself. It supplemented burnt and peace offerings. There was incense. Frankincense was used in the versions I listened to. Oil, it had to be nice oil, it had to be fine flour. Priests would receive a portion of it. There was a ceremonial or memorial portion, a handful that they would burn as the sacrifice, and then the priest would get to have the rest of it. There is the fellowship or peace offerings. This is fellowship between God and the people, a supplication to make things right, or a praise if they were already right. Here's where you get the section repeatedly over and over again. The fat, accept the fat, accept the fat. The fat belongs to God. The kidneys and the lobe of the liver, the fat tail, all these were special parts that had to be cut out and treated separately. The priest would receive the breast and the thigh. The people received the other meat. No fat, no blood. It wasn't mentioned in passing, it was emphasized. You never eat the fat. All the fat belongs to the Lord. You never drink the blood. You never consume the blood. Yeah, it goes back to post-flood, right? After the guy in the flood, Noah comes out and God says, okay, I'm going to give you all the animals now to eat of, but you don't eat the animal with the blood in it. You don't wring it, don't kill it with the blood in it, okay? No fat or blood could be consumed. And then there's sin or purification offerings. This is for forgiveness of sins, to be cleansed from impurity. Again, those are two different things. Sometimes you're offering a sacrifice to become clean, not because you sinned, but you're unclean. Sometimes it's for sin. Boom. So I will, Lord willing, I will start class Sunday morning with some observations and applications from these first 7 chapters, and then we'll go into the lightweight 8 through 10 section. Thank you.